Proverbs, we have Lady Wisdom, which you have in the Gnostic text would be Sophia. And this is, for you guys who are into this, we talked about this. This is where everything starts to come together. We start to see the esoteric understanding of the Bible in detail and where they got their information from. It's beginning with Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom is coming to basically be the personification of God's wisdom. Think about that. So she is separate, personification of God's wisdom. And you have to look at it from the esoteric point of view. We're not going to get into Sophia. Eventually, when we get into the Gnostic Bible, we'll get into what she really represents. But we want to talk about it a little bit here. But God's wisdom. And then the more you start to read about this Lady Wisdom, you see how much she is, embodying, God. So as I talked about on YouTube, she was created before the earth. Before God created us and the planet, Lady Wisdom existed. And you have to understand esoterically what it's talking about and what Lady Wisdom is. She is the wisdom of God personified, but she's a part of God. So you go back to Genesis when it's talking about in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So you have to think about it. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. So who is he talking about? Who is our? So here we go. And it's telling you, because they don't tell you that in the beginning of the Bible. It's like, okay, well, why wasn't she mentioned in Genesis to make it make more sense? And this is what I talked about before in the beginning of the Bible series, to where as we go along, you're going to see things go back to different books in the Bible to try to make it make sense. So here's one of those instances, and there's a lot more, where we have Lady Wisdom. And Lady Wisdom is, telling you, hey, I was here before all the stuff was made. God made me before he made you. And you have to understand esoterically what that is. So it's saying here, and this is in Proverbs 8, we'll read 22 to 31. The Lord formed me from the beginning, before he created anything else. I was appointed in ages past, at the very first, before the earth began. I was born before the oceans were created, before the springs bubbled forth in their waters, before the mountains were formed, before the hills I was born. Before he had made the earth and fields and the first handfuls of soil, I was there. When he established the heavens, when he drew the horizon on the oceans. I was there when he set the clouds above, when he established springs deep in the earth. I was there when he set the limit of the seas, so they would not spread beyond their boundaries. And when he marked off the earth's foundations, I was the architect at his side. Think about what she's saying here. I was his constant delight, rejoicing always in his presence. And how happy I was with the world he created, how I rejoiced with the human family. This is a big deal. I think about what's being said here. I was there before the heavens, before the earth. I was with God. And then as you get more into it, she's saying, I have this authority because I was here, so I can say what I'm saying. And you have to listen to me as you basically would listen to God. So if you're talking about, wisdom being, God's wisdom personified, this is God in essence, what we're talking about. So this is the feminine aspect of God. So we go back, as I talked about in the garden, and understanding that that's what it's talking about. Male and female, masculine and feminine energy. So we got into where Adam and Eve, how was it that, you can have a woman come from a man's rib, which we know is impossible. It's giving you, again, the electron, and understanding that the electron is what orbits the nucleus of an atom. And that orbit is called a rib. So Eve is Christmas Eve. You guys heard me say this before a million times. Eve means before, like Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. Eve means before. Woman came before man. But it's giving you the understanding that one, even still, man is there. So there's still the masculine part of the atom, and there's the feminine part. But you have the electron first. So boom, you have the electron orbiting that, and you still have this masculine energy, but it's giving you more esoteric understanding that this is wisdom. It's giving you consciousness. So even before all this, because if we talk about atoms, is going to give us material. So she is saying, before all that stuff, I was there. So we're talking about consciousness. So Lady Wisdom is giving you your subconscious. It's giving you your subconscious and understanding how powerful it is and where wisdom comes from. Wisdom has to deal with the prefrontal cortex in the brain. And this is consciousness. And it's really trying to go deep here for, Masons and people who understand what's really going on here. But for the lay person, regular person, it's wow. This is a revelation. This is powerful. She was here before everything was created. She was at God's side. So we need to really pay attention because why? This is the biggest persuasion part of the book. I got to get you to understand, because if by now you're not respecting this God, what did I tell you? If you're reading up to, you get to 2 Samuel, you're already done with God. God on some bullshit, crazy. But then now you have Lady Wisdom come. Before you have this masculine part of the Bible and God's wrath and so on and so forth. But then you have Lady Wisdom come and say, I'm a part of God, and now it's like, okay, let's listen to what she's saying. But what she's saying and conveying to everybody is, hey, you need to listen to God, follow God's wisdom, so on and so forth. And I can say this because I'm basically God. So when you get into that whole understanding of wisdom, it's knowledge, and you need wisdom. You need knowledge to do anything. You can't build a car unless you know how to do it. You can't just walk out there and say, I'm going to build me a car. You don't have the knowledge to do so. You don't have the understanding. You need to get that first. So she's breaking down how important wisdom is and how it's in everything that we do, how you have to instill it in every aspect of your life, how it's going to play a role in the decisions that you make, whether you're successful or not, because everything begins with understanding. Proverbs is one of those books that's tough for preachers to get into. And they'll quote it all the time. It's a lot of, amazing things to quote from it. But if you get into the story of it and what's being said, it raises too many questions. And that's the thing. It raises too many questions. Here you have wisdom telling you that, this is what you need to follow. Anything outside of this, you really shouldn't be messing with. So, what does she mean? And this gets really deep as you get into in the Bible. And it's one of the reasons why preachers will not touch Proverbs and get into the story, because it raises too many questions. And these are the questions that Lady Wisdom, she puts out there. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. If this is in the Bible, how do we got these people doing and saying what they said? So the thing is, what are these questions? And these questions are very important. So let's take a look at what she's trying to convey. Who is allowed to speak with God, to depend on God's presence wherever they are and whenever they need, to feel God's love and compassion, envelop them and give them peace? Okay, understand. Who is allowed to speak with God? Who is allowed to do this? Whose face do we see when we envision God? And who do we allow to see themselves as being made in the image of God? Think about that. Think about that. How can you just say God look like you? How? Who are you to say that? Where can you proclaim or give proof that God gave you authority or knowledge to say, this is how he looks? Who do we allow to serve as God's voice and messenger to the world? Question mark. Think about that, what's being said. So who is supposed to be the one to tell us this stuff? And then Lady Wisdom is basically saying, nobody can tell you this stuff. I can say what I'm saying here because of who I am. And then proceeds to basically break down what this stuff really means. So we're going to get into this outside of the Bible, but this is basically what it's saying. Inextricably tied to these questions is the inevitable question of power. Who gets to claim the authority to decide the answers to these questions? Traditionally, we've allowed certain groups to claim that authority. Groups which have conveniently aligned with those who already possess power in society. The assumptions upon which these groups based these claims were actually present within the biblical text. That God was male, that access to God in certain ritual functions was limited based on family status, and that men were granted the capacity to study the text and thus the authority to interpret its meaning. Their powers, and let me explain this real fast before I go any further. Remember, Pope, and this is what you got to think about. The Pope claims that he has all power and authority on earth, power over Jesus. Understand, he is supposed to be the go-to, the mouthpiece. You got to go to these priests, how we see in Christianity. And this is why this stuff was changed. Remember, we talking about King James Version here. Christianity, everybody can repent and be forgiven. But Catholicism, it's like, nah, because you're talking to yourself. You're not a holy person. You're a sinner. So you're not clean and you can't talk to God anyway. So, because God don't talk to sinners. So how could you be repentant when you are, that's like a thief putting himself on trial and found himself not guilty. No, it has to be a go-between. That's why we have court. This is what Catholicism is saying. So you go to the confessional, into the little booth, and you think about it as almost like a witness stand that he's on. And then you sit there and, you have the judge right next to you. And then you right next to the judge in your little witness booth. That's kind of the same situation because somebody has to judge over you and what's going on. So you have the priest there and you tell him, you're confessing your sins. And then he's supposed to be the holy person that's clean enough to get it to God. You understand? But here you have Lady Wisdom and its breakdown saying, nah, this is not how it's supposed to be. It says their power was seen as divinely granted and was bolstered by the interpretive focus on the text, which emphasizes this perspective. When the imagery used to describe the actions of God reflects the assumed cultural frameworks of male gender, it simply makes sense that men will claim authority based on the assumption that God is their gender. As God created all things, and as God is gendered, gender divisions are built into the fabric of the creation, absolutely immutable. Wisdom does something radical here. Therefore, by claiming the authority to speak for God as one who was present at and active in the creation of the building blocks from which creation was constructed, wisdom is sweeping away all human assumptions about the nature of God, of the creation and power, declaring that these questions are not only completely immaterial, but based upon a fundamentally false premise. Wisdom is rejecting the claim that humans have any say-so whatsoever in the workings of God's relationship to God's creation, upsetting and undermining all human claims to authority. Instead, she is declaring a new framework of authority and power built upon following the path of wisdom. Now, if you're following the path of wisdom, what are you following? Well, I just talked about your subconscious, consciousness, following yourself. Again, you don't have to be taught right from wrong. You know it's wrong to do certain things. That's just built into you. So it's giving you esoterically here to understand that this is within you. And that's where you're supposed to look. Same thing. Jesus is telling you later on in the New Testament, hey, I'm in you, you and me. The kingdom of heaven is within you, so on and so forth. It goes on to say, wisdom commands attention from everyone and places herself in vantage points where she will be visible to every single person. Wisdom is neither hidden nor allows anyone to hide her and calls out to all people to hear her message. The word of God from the only one besides God with the actual authority to claim to know the will of God, as wisdom is visible from everywhere in the human city and speaks to all who live. The path of wisdom is thus available to the entirety of creation, regardless of gender, class, race, or any boundaries established by humanity. This is killing the papacy. Implicit within this framework is a dual rejection of special status. One, the special status of specific scholars with the authority to interpret the meaning of the text. And two, mystery cults, where the knowledge of God is only accessible to people at certain levels of access. And this is one of the ideas, understanding that ran the Masons out of a lot of countries because people just didn't like cults and the Bible spoke against them. And this is why everybody came up against the papacy, which again, you have to understand that this is stuff that they knew that they put in the Bible, but we know they're all in this together. But this is an esoteric understanding for people in the know to get what it's talking about you. So, pertaining to God, that's you. It's talking about you, being within yourself and really governing yourself. Instead, wisdom demonstrates the absolute universality of her path through the equivalent of seizing control of every form of media. She carpets the human city with her message, rendering it impossible for any human to avoid hearing her. She is not only inviting the oppressed, the marginalized, and those who have been held captive by others' management of their access to God's love and word to throw off their shackles. She is dissolving those shackles by simultaneously dismissing the old order as mere puffs of air and establishing a new order built upon the irrevocable authority of the one who was God's only fellow worker from the beginning of the world. In this framework, all are expected to follow the path of wisdom equally, not only for their own individual good, but as the path is woven into the very fabric of creation and is thus the only way to achieve the will of God for a harmonious balance of creation. The God who wills this for creation is a God truly deserving of all honor, praise, and devotion. Now, that was amazing to just understand and read because it kills churches, which makes sense because even Jesus in the Bible didn't like preachers in churches. It kills the papacy, which makes sense because, dude, you got to prove to us that you actually talking to the God. And how come I gave you this message or I confessed to you to have my sins forgiven, but I'm still the person I am and things are not getting better in my life, so on and so forth. And it gets rid of the whole craziness of, biblical religion, and it puts it in a different realm. And it's like, okay, Lady Wisdom, it's the personification of God's wisdom, which is really a personification of your wisdom. This is you. This is just your subconscious who you need to listen to. That's all you need. Nothing else matters. It's in you, within you. So, of course, I know a lot of you understand where this came from already. We know the Bible is not, so, virtuous, and the people who wrote it didn't give us this on their own. This comes from Ma'at.